Good morning, guys. This is Poetry Unit Lesson 2. Today we're going to work on similes and metaphors. Hopefully you're enjoying our unit so far. I'm trying to ease you in to the topic. It's a little tougher, especially depending on what kind of experience you've had in the past. I will remind you that if you've had poetry lessons before that you absolutely hated, please trust me, please give me a chance. Don't make it harder than it is. Especially today's assignment, you kind of fill in the blanks, kind of like Mad Libs almost, and that should help you put together a poem. The poem almost writes itself. Again, today's lesson is on similes and metaphors. So let's look at those. Simile, remember, is a comparison using like or as. A metaphor is also a comparison, but you don't use like or as. We talked about how simile is the most common in our everyday language, but metaphor is stronger. The difference between I am like steel or I am steel. It's next level if you move on to the metaphor. It will help you if you look at the document that's on Moodle for simile and metaphor before you make your choices. I'm going to go through and explain each of those to you, so feel free, obviously, to look back at this. I'm going to explain what your assignment is going to look like once you're finished. So our first one, number 1, is a simile, and it starts off with, I never felt so. Remember, one of the things poetry does is it takes things that are abstract and makes them more concrete, and what could be more abstract than feelings. So you're trying to communicate something a little more clearly, make it understandable, a little more comprehensible. So our first one starts off with I never felt so, and you choose a color. Second thing you do is the next phrase is something that is inherently that color, meaning that if I walked up to somebody in the hall and said, what color is this item, they would probably choose the color that you did. For instance, some years I have a student who say, I never felt so purple like a dog. Okay, you walk up to somebody in the hall and ask, what color is a dog? Nobody's going to say purple. Okay, so think that through. And then the third part of that phrase is explaining. How can you feel like a color, and how can you feel like an item of that color? So one student wrote, I never felt so gold, like jewelry, my personality shines. So we have our color, gold. We have something that is gold, jewelry. Remember, walk up to somebody, what color is jewelry? They would say gold, or silver maybe. And gold and jewelry is, by nature, kind of shiny, and it's a little abstract, but somebody can have a shiny personality. Okay? Number 2. Number 2 starts off with, I never felt so, and you complete that with an inanimate object. Remember, an inanimate object is something that's not alive. The second line is making that comparison and explaining how can you feel like an inanimate object. Now, this one, guys, is a metaphor. It doesn't say, I never felt so much like this thing. I never felt so this thing. Okay? So this student chose a Band-Aid. They said, I never felt so Band-Aid. Well, how can you feel like a Band-Aid? Used until the wound is healed and then thrown away. Now, another reminder, your finished product will look just like the models, just like the examples that are on this sheet that's on Moodle. So again, you do not have the word like or as in that first line. It may sound funny to say, I never felt so Band-Aid. Might look at somebody like they had 3 heads if they said that, but again, it's metaphor. It's a little stronger than using a simile. And then the second line is explaining how could you feel like a Band-Aid. Number 3, this one is a simile. Starts off with the phrase, being young is like. Notice that this one has 3 lines. So in the first line, you choose something that's concrete, a palpable place or thing, and then your next 2 lines further explain that. It's all about stating the comparison, explaining the comparison. So this person chose being young is like an amusement park. Amusement park is a concrete thing, it's a place. How is it like an amusement park? Full of adventure and fun, laughter and surprise, but you wish the rides were not so short. We all know about that. Waiting in line at the amusement park, it seems like you wait for hours, and then the ride's over like that. A lot of people, it's human nature for them to wait forever to get older so they can get their license, so they can be legal age, so they can vote, etc. And then it seems like the joy of youth is over almost instantly. That might have been what they're going for. Next one. You are choosing something from nature. Something from nature is anything in the natural world. Think of it in the wild. If you had run into it in the wilderness, then it's probably a nature thing. First line, you complete. This is a metaphor again, so you don't use the word like. You complete the first line, I never felt so, with something from nature. And then the second line, you explain. Remember? Compare, explain. So this student chose, I never felt so thunderstorm. How can you feel like a thunderstorm? They said, I roar and rumble, and then I rain. So, whatever that might mean, I will caution you guys, and we'll talk about this during this unit. Be really suspicious or skeptical of a teacher who tries to tell you for certain what a poet meant. Why? Because unless you actually talk to the poet and ask them, what did you mean by this? Then you don't know. Can you guess? Sure. Can you make deductive reasoning? Sure. But you might not hit it on the head. Perfect example. When I was in college, I took writing courses, obviously. I had a poetry class, and I wrote a poem about how I felt like my feet were grounded, my wings were clipped, I couldn't fly like I wanted to. I wanted to leap into the heavens, and yet I was earthbound. I turned that into my class. My fellow students all analyzed it, and they were sure it was this deep metaphysical, he wants this freedom, but he feels like he's chained and he doesn't have the freedom he desires. When they were done saying that that's probably what it meant, I explained, oh, my flight was canceled. I was stranded in the Denver airport. I just wanted to get out of there. That was purely it. So again, could you read something into it that's not there? Certainly. Does that give validity to the poem? Sure. But you have to be careful if you're saying this is what the author meant. It should rather be they might have meant this. Let's move on to the next one. This is a simile. Life is like a game of. Now, when they talk about games, they mean video games, sports, board games, whatever. Okay, a game. Remember, first line, you have the comparison. Then this one has 3 lines, so the next 2 lines you explain that comparison. This student chose tennis. They said, life is like a game of tennis. You'll hit one ball, you'll miss the next, and everyone has a few faults. I like that last line, faults. In tennis, it's a term that if your serve is incorrect, that's a fault. And in real life, we have faults, meaning we have vices or we have imperfections. Number 6, this is a simile, and be really careful with the next couple ones here, guys, that I almost hesitated to choose some of these examples because it might narrow you into a train of thought. Fill in the correct information and it will almost write itself. So number 6 is being alone is like. And again, remember we're comparing this abstract thing, being alone, to something more concrete, something more physical. In the first line, you make the comparison. Next 2 lines, you explain the comparison. So they said, being alone is like dancing without music. Explain. That sounds intriguing. You can go through the motions, but you're missing the most important part. Obviously, dancing is responding to rhythm, usually the rhythm of music. If you have no music, yeah, we can have a song playing in our head and we can dance. We've probably all done that. But they are trying to make a point as far as you're missing out on something if you are if you're alone. Now, on this one, be careful because you have to ask yourself first, if you can write this one, what is it like for you to be alone? This person made it sound like a negative thing. Some people, especially guys, if you have a whole bunch of sibs at home and you never have time by yourself, especially on your little coronation this year, then your being alone might be something very positive. You might relish and really appreciate and enjoy the chance to be alone. So on this one, kind of decide, do I like to be alone? Do I not like to be alone? And then that will help you make that comparison. So compare it to something. Is it like a bicycle with a broken wheel? Is it like whatever? Okay, so you make that comparison. It is a simile. And number 7 is also a simile. And this one I hesitated to share with you because they compare losing a friend to losing something else. It does not have to be that way, guys. You don't have to compare the loss of a friend to the loss of an integral part of your life. And in fact, this kind of narrows it down, so you might want to expand what it's like. Again, most people would think losing a friend is a negative thing, or they probably wouldn't be your friend in the first place. So first line is making that comparison. Next 3 lines is explaining the comparison. So they said, losing a friend is like losing a game. You try hard to make the right moves and score the needed points, but when it's over, you've still lost. So what they perhaps are saying is, you try to make a friendship work, it doesn't always. Obviously, when you're competing, you're trying to win, and you don't always. No matter how hard you try, you still might not win in the end. Now, what you're going to do on this one, guys, is you're going to read through these. You're going to choose 2, and you're going to write 2 of these poems. This is free verse, by the way, still, because we don't have a rhythm or a rhyme scheme. You're going to have to choose a simile and a metaphor. So if you don't feel like listening back through this video, what you do is you look at the first part of each of the poems and see, does it have the word like in it or as? If it does, then that's a simile. If it doesn't, that's a metaphor. You're going to choose to write one of each, simile and metaphor, so you'll have 2 poems. You will type those up. They should look exactly the same as the examples. So if it's a 1-line poem with 3 phrases, bam. If it's a 2-line poem, if it's 3, or I think the longest one is 4, then your finished product should look like that. Do not skip any of the steps. There's a system that you follow here. You're going to submit these in writing on Moodle, and then on Flipgrid, you're going to read those to us. So, it may sound a little tough. It may be hard for you to wrap your mind around this type of writing because it is poetry, and it's turning abstract into concrete. But guys, think of it as just like filling in the blanks. I have to choose a color. I have to choose something that is inherently that color, meaning it's normal for it to be that color. And I have to choose, how can I explain that I feel like that color? Don't overthink it. Choose something. I never felt so brown. Okay? Well, what's something that's brown? Dirt. I never felt so brown like dirt. How could you feel brown like dirt? People walk all over me. There you go. Off the top of my head, bam, pretty simple. So go ahead, have fun with this, submit those, and remember, as always, guys, you are blessed to be a blessing. Adios.